In today's 30-minute meal prep, I am making a quinoa pizza crust, a batch of roasted vegetables, and some homemade hummus, all of which together make a delicious Mediterranean pizza for lunch. What I love about today's recipes is they can all be used in different ways, so you don't wind up eating the exact same thing every single day. I want to make sure we get to everything in 30 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm making today is a double batch of my quinoa pizza crust, which comes from my second cookbook, No Excuses Detox. I don't believe I have this recipe written down anywhere else on my website, so make sure you listen closely as I walk you through the ingredients. I call this my overnight quinoa pizza crust because I usually soak the dry quinoa in water in my fridge overnight. Soaking the quinoa helps remove some of the bitter flavor, and it makes it softer so it breaks down in your blender a lot faster. I totally forgot to soak my quinoa last night, so I have only been soaking this for about an hour on my counter, and that's still plenty. So if you forget to soak your quinoa, it's okay. I would make sure you soak your quinoa for at least 15 minutes to help remove some of that bitterness, but then you can rinse and drain it and it'll be ready to use in this recipe. Into the blender, I'm adding 1.5 cups of that soaked and drained quinoa, followed by a cup of peeled and chopped zucchini, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar, which is going to react with that baking soda to help make this vegan pizza crust rise. Now you just have to blend it. If your blender is having a hard time breaking down the quinoa, it's okay to add water 1 tablespoon at a time until it's easier to blend. This quinoa batter is probably going to be unlike any pizza crust you've ever worked with before, but just trust me on this one and know that it works. Line a large baking sheet with parchment paper, and then you're going to pour the quinoa batter onto the baking sheet and use a spatula to spread the batter into a smooth circle, about 10 to 12 inches wide if you want to make 2 large pizza crusts, or spread it about 5 inches wide if you want to make 4 individual pizza crusts. I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees, and now I'm going to bake those quinoa pizza crusts for about 20 minutes. Now that that's in the oven, I'm going to go ahead and slice up some extra vegetables that I can roast on another baking sheet, and I will have them roasting in the oven at the same time as my pizza crust. I have 1 more zucchini I want to use up, so I'm slicing that into half moon shapes. And then I'm also slicing red onion, and I try to keep that a little on the thicker side so it doesn't cook too quickly and start to burn. And then I'm slicing some cherry tomatoes in half, and I'm arranging them on my baking sheet cut side down. I'm going to drizzle all of this with a little bit of olive oil and then toss it directly in the pan. And season it with some salt, and then I'm going to add that to my oven along with my pizza. Now that my pizza crust and vegetables are in the oven, I'm going to use my remaining time to make a batch of homemade hummus. To make my homemade hummus, you can use 1 can of chickpeas that's been drained and rinsed really well, or 1.5 cups of homemade cooked chickpeas. You're also going to add a 1/4 cup of raw tahini, 3 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice, 1 medium to large clove of garlic, and I like to use my microplane to finely mince the garlic into my food processor so there aren't any big chunks, 3/4 teaspoon of ground cumin, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of olive oil, and 3 tablespoons of water. Now you just need to process this until it's smooth. Now that the hummus is done, it's time to check on everything in the oven. It looks like the pizza crusts are ready, so I'm going to grab those and let the veggies cook for another few minutes. Once the pizza crust is cool enough to handle, I like to peel the parchment away from the edges, and then I flip it over so I can peel the rest of the paper off of the crust. You'll see that the pizza crust is firm enough to pick up and it's not going to fall apart when you eat it. The roasted vegetables are looking tender now, so I'm going to take them out of the oven and let them cool. To store this pizza crust, I like to cut it into slices so that it will easily fit into my storage bags. And then I store the roasted vegetables in their own container and the hummus in a separate container. When you're ready to make one of the Mediterranean pizzas for lunch, you'll spread the hummus on top of your quinoa crust and top it with the roasted vegetables. I eat this cold because it's the fastest way to eat it, but you can also reheat it if that's what you prefer. When you store these ingredients separately, they should last for up to a week in your fridge, so I hope they'll come in handy for you all week long. I hope this meal prep session is helpful for you, and if you need more healthy recipes, be sure to visit my website, detoxanista.com.